Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back with my partner in crime, none other than the legendary Carmela Monk Crawford, editor of Message Magazine. And we are once again doing a program called Excruciating Cries from Memphis. Excruciating Cries from Memphis. And just excited to have the editor of Message Magazine, who's been a great partner and with the Conscience and Justice Council. Last year, we released a devotional book called Let Justice Roll. We've worked together in so many different arenas, and we were in Memphis last time in November for the Church of God in Christ convention. And
Yeah.
now we're here in this virtual space talking about excruciating cries from Memphis. Carmela, welcome to the broadcast, and thank you for co hosting with me.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry for the occasion, but I hope that what we go through tonight and what we can discuss tonight can help us at least move forward internally ourselves.
All right, we have a chance to introduce our all-star lineup, boots on the ground, boots on the ground, none other than Pastor Nathaniel H. Drew. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like controversy follows him as a great pastor. He was pastoring in Charlottesville when there was wrong on both sides, and now he is pastoring in Memphis, Tennessee, with regards to the Tyre Nichols and Pastor Drew, tell us a little about, what happened. You're right there on the ground. Share a little bit about what happened.
Yeah. So first of all, Wood, it's good to be here with you, and also to see another familiar face that I am very fond of in the Carmela Monk Crawford, who was also very instrumental in helping us to be of assistance in Charlottesville when that horrific situation was happening. And so, yeah, much like you said, here we are again. It seems with another traumatic situation. 29-year-old Tyre Nichols in caught on the wrong end of the police once again, where I originally I thought five, but then I've heard that others that were involved in it, but essentially lost his life being beaten to death. It is very somber in the city right now. A lot of questions, obviously. People trying to figure out what went wrong. Right when you're looking at something like this, you have more answers than questions. It seems why things happened the way they did. Why did it seem like certain protocol was not followed? So there's a lot happening in the city right now, and all we can do is try our best, as always, to be of assistance.
So, can you give us a little bit more about what happened? In terms of he got shot, the police officers, the investigation, protests.
Yeah.
Give us what's going on.
So as many of us saw Friday, the video footage of what took place happened, and from what we've seen, we have these officers that approach the video of Tyre, the vehicle rather of Tyree, and it seems like they are already dead set and have their mindset on terrorizing him. You don't really see any kind of protocol that you normally would see in a regular stop when maybe something has happened. Maybe he's driving crazy, maybe he's swerving, maybe he's speeding, right? But it seems that they made a beeline to his car, yanks him out of the car, and begins accosting him right from jump, really, and which caused a lot of confusion. There was one at one point in time he was able to break free and run, to which, for those who have seen the video, and if you haven't, listen, by all means, protect your peace, right? If that's not what you feel will help your mental health, seeing that, by all means do that. But he does flee for a moment. They unfortunately catch him, and then that's when all manner of things happen. He's pepper sprayed over and over again with his hands held behind him. He's pinned to the pavement by multiple officers, and I don't know if anybody has ever caught even a fraction of what pepper spray feels like. It is debilitating, and he's literally having it just sprayed into his face without any kind of protection. You can see him being physically beaten with his hands pinned behind him, where he's being punched over and over again in his face. He's being kicked. He's being kneed. A cop at one point pulls a baton, and so you see all of these things happening. And one of the most harrowing scenes of it was the scene where I guess they have finished with the assaulting that they did to him, and he's just sitting, kind of lifeless. It seems on his back to the car. He's handcuffed. His head is just limp. He's bleeding profusely. And even in that scene, there's one cop who maybe felt some kind of a moral compass at that point that said, should we move him closer to health, to health personnel, to the EMT? Should we move him closer, to which they say no. And an expletive, HELL, no, leave him there. And they commence to joking about it as if this is a game. So just in summary, it is a horrible situation. No matter which way you look at it, the city is hurting, that family is hurting, and there's even a lot more information that's coming out now, concerning what these cops knew about him before they pulled him out. Right? There's talk now of maybe Tyree being involved with an ex-wife or girlfriend of one of the cops. So then it seems like it's premeditated. So all of these things that are happening just adds fuel to what's already a huge fire.
Chaplain Bakiba Garrison, bioethics chaplain, a wonderful wife, wonderful mother. Drew was sharing some of the things that was taking place, as a mother, as a chaplain. What are your thoughts about what's taking there as boots on the ground, also in Memphis, Tennessee? Did you see the video? Did it grip you? Tell us how you felt.
I'm absolutely heartbroken. I have two sons of my own, and each time they leave the house, I'm concerned. Each time my husband leaves the house, I'm concerned. I did watch the video, but I could not bring myself to watch the video with the audio. So I just saw the city cam, and I was sickened. I was I was distraught. I could not understand how this many individuals could commence to do this to one individual who was already handcuffed, who was already subdued. And I just could not, and I still can't understand. I still can't understand the evil of it all. But as a bioethics chaplain, I look to the ethics, and I understand that every person needs to be heard. So at the hospital, there's been a lot of just fear. So media from all different states have descended upon our city, and they were talking about riots, and they were talking about our hospital went into a vigilant alert. We had extra officers added to our rotation, and so there was a fear. And in my gut, I'm thinking, you're fearful because of this event. This is our everyday life, living in this skin. This is our fear every day. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel, and I hope these conversations will activate us to do more.
I would love to, unfortunately, when you say this is every day, can you tell us a little bit about the Memphis Police Department's reputation for this kind of thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, I just watched another video of a young man who was driving to his business, and he said that the police pulled up behind him. He couldn't imagine what he had done wrong. He was going the speed limit. He said he lowered to about 10 miles per hour, and he said his whole objective was to get to his business where he could activate his cameras. And so as he's telling this story, this happened yesterday. And so as he's telling this story, he said all he could imagine was that there would be another incident and he would not be able to be seen on camera. So his whole objective was to get to his business. And when the cop came to his window and he said, hey, what's going on? He said, you have an illegal tag. And he said, no, my tag is legal. He said, matter of fact, this is my business. And so he showed the cop his phone and he said, hey, I want you to see that I just activated my camera so that they can get this whole incident. And the officer's response was, not all officers are like those five. And this young gentleman said immediately, my heart began to pound in my chest, because how do I know that? And
Yeah.
so the Memphis police officers here's the thing. We have a lot of Black officers in the city. Our city is 50% chocolate. And I love being a Memphian. I love living here. So in the beginning, I felt safe because we were, in uniform. We're representing. But now there is this ultimate fear that, if I get pulled over by white or Black, it does not matter.
Pastor Drew, do you know anything about this Scorpion unit, of which these 5 were supposedly a part of this special unit?
Yeah, honestly, my first time hearing about that was unfortunately this situation,
Okay.
and so everything that I'm kind of learning about it, I'm learning with everyone else. I've since learned that it's been disbanded. But if we're honest, this is a tale as old as time. And you can look at any of our inner cities, especially that is overpopulated with people who look like us. And oftentimes the answer that our government and city councils and those in power, oftentimes what the answers that they use for poverty and for crime and for foodlessness and for whatever else you want to mention is to overpopulate or oversaturate these areas with police. More police, and I've yet to see a situation like that, especially in inner city, where oversaturating with the presence of more police officers has resulted in something good versus something bad. We've often seen it result in much like what has brought us here right now. And I've heard a lot as well, people thinking, well, these were Black police officers, right? So why should we have to fear? And even from a historical standpoint as well, whether people say it's in order for them to gain the respect of the department or whatever it is, we often have to fear more sometimes when it's people in power, unfortunately, who look like us, right? We tend to be treated more aggressively, and I don't know what the response for it is. But to answer your question, this is my first time hearing about that unit, but I'm very happy to hear that it's been disbanded.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback on what you said, Pastor Drew, about the historic viewpoint? I want to read something that James Baldwin said about Black cops. And this is a direct quote. It said, "Black policemen were another matter. We used to say, if you just must call a policeman, for we hardly ever did. For God's sake, try to make sure it's a white one. A Black policeman would completely demolish you. He knew far more about you than a white policeman could, and you were without defenses before this Black brother in uniform whose entire reason for breathing seemed to be his hope to offer proof that though he was Black, he was not Black like you." End quote.
Mercy.
Yeah.
Well,
Unfortunately, go ahead. Sorry.
that's an excellent segue to bring in 2 police officers,
Yeah.
one who's active and one who's retired. And let's bring from New Orleans now, the director at the St. Tammany Hospital, the chief of security, Chief Ken Scott. Happy to have him here. In addition to him, we'll have Terrence Jones from the Total Justice, who's a former police officer for the city of Philadelphia. And gentlemen, you heard the quote from James Baldwin by our chaplain, Makiva Garrison. How much of that resonates with you?
So I can begin. First of all, thank you so much for having me and giving me the ability to chime in on this situation. As many of you know, for years, I have taken the opportunity to share my experiences with young people in an effort to avoid these type of situations where possible. The troubling thing for me is that, for one, this was African Americans who were assaulting someone who I'm sure they had a cousin, a brother, a nephew who looked exactly like this man. What happened, in my view, a couple of things real quick, is the officers bought into what we call the herd mentality. They saw one person, one officer initially being violent, and they just jumped in and started doing the same thing. Also, another thing that's very troubling to me is not only was the police department seemed to be not seemed to be, but they were extremely brutal. But the people who were sent there to help, the EMTs as well. So it seems to be in Memphis, they have a system that seems to accept this sort of behavior. I will tell you this, one of the things that Pastor Drew addressed is the specialty units. So a lot of times in cities, they put together these specialty units, and because they are, a lot of times they get a lot of drugs off the street, they get guns off the street. The way that they do that, a lot of times, the people overlook their tactics and the things that they do because they say, well, yeah, they might have some officers who are not doing things by the book or by protocol. However, they got 500 guns off of the street. But how did they do it? That, if you're out there and you're violating constitutional rights and civil rights, then you're not policing the way that police were taught to do. I think it's interesting, Dr. Garrison, what you said, that the quote that you said about the Black police officers. And I have to tell you, and I know this might sound cliche, but not all Black police officers are like that or don't fit that mold. I've been doing this for 34 years. And I was chief of police in Capitol Heights, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. I'm chief of a couple of agencies in New Orleans. So I've been in probably some of the most dangerous areas of our nation as a police executive. And this mentality that they showed on that particular night toward that gentleman was something that is totally unacceptable. And the only way that we are going to get past this is, and I'll end on this note. I remember when Rodney King incident happened. And I looked at that. I was on Prince George's County Police Department, which, by the way, a national men's magazine named it as one of the most brutal police departments in the nation. Carmela's from that area, and Nathaniel as well. So they know what I'm talking about, the reputation there. When I saw the Rodney King incident on television, the mentality that I had at that time was, what was the big deal? What's the problem? He ran from the police. He got a wood shampoo. That's what's supposed to happen. My only issue at the time was it was videotaped. Why did they allow someone to videotape it? However, that singular incident changed at that moment the momentum of policing. So what do we have to do in this incident? We cannot let this death be in vain. We cannot. Just as Prince George's County made a change for the better, even if it was for a small moment in time, we have got to grasp onto this particular death, and we need to make sure and institute change. The only way we make change is if you get involved.
Yeah. This is so disturbing because I remember Rodney King so clearly, even in that muddy video. And we did think that things were going to change, Chief Scott. But here we are. How many years? That was 1992. And here we are 30 years more later.
You are
we're, and this is not just one singular instance. We are just now trailing George Floyd and trailing all of these other high profile videotaped things. What is it going to take? What you're saying, we have to get on board, but if nothing happened after George Floyd, what can we possibly do?
Yeah, and so when I say get involved, this is my take, and when I do my seminars, this is one of the things that I have to ask. These are excellent discussion points that we can have among ourselves. We need to be a presence with the police commanders in our community. Pastor Drew, I'm pretty sure you're probably doing it where you are. I follow you on social media. I know that you're totally engaged in that. We need to hold the leaders accountable, who will then hold the officers accountable. I can remember Chief Mitchell was the chief during that time, and I remember we had so many in-service trainings. Not only that, I've done in-service trainings for over 30 something years. One of the things, the only in-service training that stood on my mind, he made us go to the Holocaust Museum because of the tragedies that they involve and how police were involved in the Holocaust. We went to the museum as a sensitivity training. And that's something that we have got to get people back to, sensitivity. How we do that, we've got to be creative in that. When I say get involved, go to your civic meetings, go to your community meetings, get to know the people who are policing in your neighborhood. It sounds cliche, but it's something that I believe will work and will help. We can have these conversations among ourselves. It does no good if we do not bring these issues to the forefront and keep our foot on the police leader's neck. It's probably a bad analogy, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's bad wording on that one, but I understand what you're saying. And I want to direct this question to both of you. And I'm sorry, Edward Woods, if I'm jumping in too much.
No,
but
go ahead.
Terrence Jones and Chief Scott, we've always told our children to respect the police. We have that talk with our sons. In this instance, there was no reason for the stop.
They said it was reckless driving. That's what alleged is said, but that can be a catch-all. Reckless driving is up to the discretion of the officer. Reckless driving could be I went over the double yellow line once when I was checking my phone. You're reckless driving. I'm sorry, Terrence. Mr. Jones, I'll let you chime in as well.
No problem. You've already answered that. What I want to add to it, to what Chief Scott said, is and there's nothing wrong with having different perspectives. In other words, Chief Scott has his perspective through his experiences, and I have my perspective through my experiences. I'm a former highly decorated police officer out of Philadelphia. I worked 10 different special units in the city of Philadelphia. And in my 11-year career, I made over 1,000 felony arrests. And then when my career was over with and I was injured on duty, I enjoyed my retirement and getting my disability pension. And then I was pulled over by a police officer in my community where I live that had no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, no reason to stop me other than the color of my skin. When I filed a complaint against the officer, the police department did no investigation. They gave it to the prosecutor's office in Gloucester County, where I live in New Jersey. And they brought me in. So this is all part of the problem. So when they brought me in, they never showed me the dash cam video from the police cruiser, but they showed the officer the dash cam video. If you show the officer the dash cam video or body camera, if you assault someone or whatever the situation is, then you can get your story together. So this is all part of the problem. Most police departments in the United States, if an officer gets involved in a shooting, if an officer gets involved in using excessive force, like in Memphis, Tennessee, and I have cases across the country, they always show them the body cam video so they can get their story together. And then they have multiple officers and multiple supervisors and the police chief helping them to get their story together. So in my situation, no investigation through my complaint of an improper stop, and they give it to the prosecutor's office, and then they bring me in without showing me any video, and they say, is it racial profiling? Or you say, I said, well, it's improper stop. But they kept hinting on, is it racial profiling? Is it racial profiling? So after a while, I said it could have been racial profiling. And then what they did was, 5 months later, they arrested me on my birthday. And when they arrested me, they charged me with unlawful charges. They charged me with false reports and false swearing. In New Jersey, they have a racial profiling law that has never been enforced. And I spoke with the governor, and I know this for a fact. It's a racial profiling law because of the Jersey four minorities on the New Jersey Turnpike that got shot, and they survived. And Reverend Al Sharpton got involved in the case, and the legendary Johnny Cochran got involved in the case. Mm-hmm. And it's the largest settlement against police, $12-something million. And they set up a racial profiling law. That racial profiling law have never been enforced. So what I'm getting at is I had a 3-day trial all over the news with my wife there, and the judge stopped the trial and told me something that made me cry. And I have the video of this. And what she said was, I don't understand why Mr. Jones was under arrest when the officer had no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion. There was no reason to stop him. Mm-hmm. And doesn't understand why the officer isn't here. They never locked the officer up. So where I'm getting at now, moving forward, that was in 2007. In 2008, a deputy attorney general, highest law enforcement agency in the state of New Jersey, a deputy attorney general, at his bachelor party was assaulted. And it was caught on, it's Atlantic City, so it was caught on the video camera, surveillance video camera from the casino. And what the officer did was he said, hey, come around to the back of the vehicle where his body camera couldn't show it, and took his head, this deputy attorney general who's a lawyer, and smashed it. Then charged him, and this is what they do, they charged him with assaulting the police, even though he got assaulted. I was involved in the case. Obviously a lawyer was involved, and we got the charges dismissed, and the lawyer got a lot of money, but they never locked the officer up. Most of these states across the United States, let me be clear, most of them are police states, including Tennessee. And when I say police states, meaning that when you say that most officers are good, and this is the false narrative, most officers are good, only a few are bad. Okay, I'll go with that. I'm a former police officer. I'm a good officer, right? Retired. If most officers are good and only a few are bad, then why aren't the other officers that are good holding the bad officers accountable? Why aren't the supervisors that are supposedly good, allegedly good, holding the officers that are bad accountable? Why isn't the police chief holding the bad officers accountable? Why isn't the prosecutors, the state attorney general, and the feds, why aren't they holding the officers accountable?
Well, so, Mr. Jones, I was just going to ask you, though. I mean, you're telling us about the work that you're doing. I mean, you've committed your life to sort of stopping this kind of abuse. The rest of us are feeling not only like powerless in some ways, but we've got children out there. We're out there ourselves. What are we going to do? And Chief Scott has said at least we need to be going to these meetings or anything. But I mean, is there something else? What are the cheat codes between the two of you that could maybe make something happen?
Thank you. I agree with Chief Scott that the community does have to get involved. I do agree with that 100%. But for me, on a higher level than that, we have to, as a community, and I volunteer my time and have cases across the country. I've gotten officers arrested, like 13 officers arrested, gotten over 35 cases dismissed without going to trial once I got involved through my independent fact-finding investigations. I believe you got to do exactly what Chief Scott says. You got to be active. You got to hold your police chief, and you got to hold your elected officials accountable by going to mayor and city council meetings like I've done, and things of that nature. But the other prong of this, which to me is a much important prong, you got to vote people out of office that are covering up for this type of misconduct. Like in Florida, you have an attorney general. I was asked to get involved in the case of Crystal Foster's brother. I got involved like 5 years later. I was asked to get involved, and the attorney general for the state of Florida, she did an investigation for 5 years. The statute of limitations for filing a lawsuit is 2 years. Why does it take that long? Well, you know that they're trying to cover it up. Mm-hmm. So in the case of, unfortunately, Crystal's brother, my investigation found that that what the officer said was a lie. It's something that he made up. Her brother was running, and the officer shot him in the back and in the buttocks. So how, so you're shooting him from behind, you know what I mean? And he was cleared by the three different, by the police department, by the he was cleared on a city level, on a state level. You know what I mean? And they never locked this officer up. And then we found out that he had 6 other shootings in a 10-year period, and killing black men. You know what I mean? And I was asked to do some other investigations, and some other investigations. He's shooting at someone, over 100 feet away while he's climbing up a gate. Again, shooting him in the back. And the language is all the same. You know what I mean? So that's how you know it's a lie. So I guess what I'm saying is you have to hold them accountable. My hat goes off to, and I commend the chief. Her name has passed me by, but the chief of Memphis for coming in front of, coming in front of it. Mm-hmm. And she's the real deal. She's coming in front of it. But you need more police chiefs like that. You need to fire a lot of these police chiefs. Not Chief Scott, but you need to fire a lot of these police chiefs that are not holding their officers accountable. And as far as these undercover units, like I said, I worked 10 different special units. One of them was the anti-crime team, where we mainly concentrated on violent crimes throughout the whole city of Philadelphia. And I worked undercover. And what I'm saying is a lot of the undercover units, what was different there than with us, like we would wear a vest that had police on it. Most of these undercover units in the United States, you can't identify the officers, and it starts with the vehicle that they're in. They have an illegal limousine tint. So to me, let's not be hypocrites. If you can't have a limousine tint, I know in Florida that you can, but out in New Jersey, out in Pennsylvania, out on the East Coast, and in the North, it's against the law to have a limousine tint. But these officers are riding around a limousine tent. Why? Because you can't identify them. So when they come out of the vehicle and they commit crimes and they use excessive force, they have no identifying marks. When I would come undercover, working in plain clothes, I'd have a vest that says police on it. I have around my neck a chain that has my badge number. I have my name. You know what I mean? And so you can identify me. So I think they're going around these undercover units. They're unsupervised. There's big time lack of supervision. They're putting officers in these special units, undercover units, for gun violence and violent crimes that have many excessive force complaints. So they got the wrong officers in there to begin with, and they're not holding them accountable. There's no system to flag these officers when you have your first complaint, your second complaint, your third complaint. David Castellini in Atlantic City, I did an investigation, who was brutally assaulted by police. I got the video, gave it to CNN, and it went, nationwide. And in that video, it showed that he's down and he's not resisting, and his hands behind his back, and the officers will punch him in the face. And then a canine officer comes out, and he has a dog, and the dog puts 150 stitches on the back of his neck. He's biting him all over the place. You know what I mean? That officer had 25, 26, 27 excessive force complaints against him. How is he still allowed to be a police officer? You know what I mean? So they're not holding these officers accountable. They're not doing fair, impartial, thorough investigations. And you need to get rid of those people in internal affairs, and you need to get rid of these police chiefs. Anybody that's protecting these police officers, and the fact that these officers in Memphis are black, does not give them a pass. They do not get a pass because they're black. At the end of the day, you got to hold them all accountable, no matter what color you are. And they need to lock these officers up, and they need to vote these prosecutors out of office that are refusing to lock these officers up.
Okay. Crystal Foster, Terrence Jones referenced you in the loss of your brother in Florida. Can you share a little bit about your story and how you've changed your pain into purpose as a result of losing a family member at the hands of police, just like Tyre Nichols?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Yes, Terrence is phenomenal. I can tell you that my brother had just only been in Florida for some years, coming from New York City. And he was doing his normal routine, walking to the store, which was a few blocks from his house, and in a broad daylight where there was, many people in the streets, and there was a so-called 911 call saying that there was a guy wielding a gun. This officer just profiled my brother and just rammed his vehicle into my brother. Within 10 seconds, he shot my brother from inside the vehicle, outside the vehicle, in broad daylight. My brother was still alive when he dropped to his knees and his hands up, according to all of the witnesses. And he just put 11 bullets into my brother's back, his neck, in his arm, his buttocks. And this officer, prior to that, he had killed 2 other people and shot a total of 6 people and a canine dog within 10 years. And to see how no one in the community, not even our own people, our own brothers, our leaders, are assisting us in these cases. I took it upon myself, between my sister and I, and I've learned through the process. And I can tell you, I did 85-90% of my brother's case by myself with my sister before Terrence and Eric Pettis got into my case. And I can tell you, learning the process, it's not the people. Most of the time, it's the system. It's the system that is hurting us and killing us. Because I've learned that through the city councils, when we are in numbers and in bodies, we can make change. And for 4 years till this day, we never had a police report. We didn't have any answers. So what we did was we hired a private investigator and got pictures of my brother's body, because I knew that they were not going to say, they were going to hide the images, and there was cameras everywhere. And what happens is the chief of police is well known. His son is in. His name is Chief Rowe. His son used to play in the NFL. Antrell Rowe. He's well known. They're close to the state attorney's office, and the state attorney's never convicted an officer in 27 years. When they did the closing memo, there was no fingerprints of my brother on the gun at all. And there's so many. We see, if we don't do our homework, there's so many documents that they forge. The commissioners they pretend like they're with you and they're against you. They're getting all of the information they can get from you just to give it to the state attorney's office. I recommend anyone that's going through this process. I always tell my brother's children, never accept no for an answer. Fight all the way to the end, because no one can tell you, no one can give you justice but God. No one can give you justice. And for me, till this day, 5 years later, we are still fighting my brother's case. Because when Terrence and Eric got involved, they just recently did a deposition on this officer. And guess what? 2 days later, he retired. He retired. He was caught in so many lies. He retired. And so what does that tell you? So, I honestly, before all of this, his kids lost their mother in a drive-by shooting. So you have 6 kids that lost a mother and a father to gun violence. And it's just unacceptable. And when we see these images, which I really couldn't see the whole Tyre Nichols video, because it's like we live in the moment. When we saw George Floyd calling for his mother, it's like, you would think that America, the nation, after what we are going through, mental illness, they would reevaluate these officers. They would take away and remove these bad apples. What is going, reevaluate, do more evaluations. These things are not being done. So to see, and we're going to say it, 5 Black officers, because it doesn't matter what color, religion you are, this is unjustifiable. And it's just something that profound sadness. And I, took my pain into a purpose. And I help others, and whatever I can do to assist in this process, because you're alone in this process. Yeah. And when these leaders and these commissioners are only around when it's time to vote, that is a problem. We as people need to set an example and start standing up for ourselves, because there's a lot of money in the city. And I took it upon myself with my audience on Facebook and some great leaders. And we pushed for body cameras in that city, because I was not going to allow another person to go through what I went through. And we was able, after 3 different budget hearings, we was able to get, and I say we because it's never I, it's we was able to get body cameras in the city of Homestead. So, I tell people, just, never let the system beat you to it. Do what you got to do. There's a Facebook. I got all of my witnesses through Facebook. Wow. And trust me, it works. It works. And it's just so sad to see how many more police officers how many more police encounters has to happen, to demand a federal government equal protection, as is written in our Constitution. It is just I'm lost for words, and I just pray that they get justice, because we still need to fight for more people to, get arrested. And to see, also, we have to keep in mind, to see a chief
Mm.
in 19 days take action. That shows results, because
Yeah.
no other city does that. It takes for us to make noise, and there's so many Tyre Nichols around the world. There's so many of my brother Edward Fosters around the world, but because they don't get national attention,
Yeah.
they don't get any assistance. And so what happens behind closed doors, the court system fails us, the judges fails us. So we as people, and I'm asking the audience, we got to stand together. We got to stand together and vote these people out, and only us can make the change.
Mm. Yeah. Well, you mentioned the George Floyd Police Reform Act. I didn't know if this is where you were going
Go ahead.
but if we could, I mean, this has been languishing and hasn't had any traction since George Floyd. What is it that we need to do to add to this? Chief Scott and Terrence Jones and Crystal Foster, or anything else have you seen that helps make momentum in the halls of justice and in our legislative bodies?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we cannot change the color of our skins, but we can change the positions that these people are in, these positions that these city officials are in. If we stand together in solidarity, we it's only us, we can make change. And that's what we're seeing. If the people didn't stand together, we
Mhm.
wouldn't have seen a George Floyd. If no one recorded the video, there would have never been a George Floyd. And I think that's the only thing that we can do, is come together in unity. Doesn't matter what color you are, because these officers were black. Because they're black, they get a pass? Absolutely not. What they did was, that's torture. That was gang violence. That was deadly use of force. That no one should endure that. My brother should have never endured that. We shouldn't have to be scared for our children to go to the store and not know they're gonna come home. Especially in the times that we're living in with inflation, it is so hard out here. And to see how these officers have no remorse for human life, it's just us as people. That's the only thing I can see. Us as people standing in solidarity, allowing and pushing for change, and not allowing anyone to stand in front of us.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Carmel, is um, when I was a spokesperson for Prince George's County, one of the things that we used to say in that office all the time is, what's news today, and you'll know this as a journalist, what's news today means nothing tomorrow. Unfortunately, that is how our mentality is. But what we have to do is, we have got, like I said before, we've got to keep the pressure on constantly for accountability. Anything lacking of that, and once again, officers, we're human. We're going to go back into the same mode and doing the same thing over again, because once the stress is off, the spotlight is off of us, we don't think anyone is filming anymore. Now you're going to go back into doing the same things. Weeding those officers out of the department should be utmost number one for any chief who's worth his salt. You have to get rid of them. Now, as anyone knows, changing an organization is not an overnight process, especially a police department, because you have 20, 25-year retirements. So someone can be on the police department doing this crap for 20, 25 years and never get caught. So now, as one of the things that we need to do, I believe, is, and I see a lot of comments about police when they started out, they were slave catchers and all these things. However, I do believe that if we train our men, our young men, to go into law enforcement, and we give them the tools necessary to be successful, it will help change our future generations of how we police.
And I want to piggyback on what Chief Scott said. Most of these police departments, like the police department of Philadelphia, have like $1 billion budget, but they don't have enough money to make sure every police officer has a body cam. Just let that sink in for a second. So their money being used for what? Every police department, every officer, whether he's undercover or in uniform, should have a body cam. Because my daughter, who's like chief of staff for total justice, said that the body cameras, you know, they show the truth. They never lie. So,
But yet we were watching body cam. I mean, what is going through the mind? Obviously, nothing is going through your mind when you're running toward the person and you're beating them. You've got the thing on, and it doesn't deter him. That for me, that's what I want. I want deterrence rather than having the recording at the end and feeling better about I have the recording so that we can get him after the fact or her after the fact. You know what I mean? The body cam only gives us, you know, something that's, you know, it is, yes, it is a development and it is proof.
Sure. And what you're saying is 100% true. The mentality is, yeah, I'm being recorded. However, I'm still going to do this. I'm still going to commit this crime. It means nothing. You would think that it would be a deterrent. Like I said, I remember that when I have to go back to Rodney King all the time. So one of the things when we're making a traffic stop, they would tell you, hey, look across the street. You'll see the blinking. Remember, I don't know if they have the camcorders with blinking red lights. Mm-hmm. So you know someone was filming. So you needed to act right. So they put in our mind that we need to make sure we're doing everything right on this traffic stop or this encounter. Those guys they could care less whether they were being filmed. Not once, but twice. I will tell you also the mentality. The mentality among police a lot of times is if you run from us, all right, and we have to chase you. And if you look at the tape, those guys, those police officers were out of shape. They were asking for water and huffing and puffing. So now they're upset. Now their adrenaline is pumping. Then when they finally encountered him the second time, they were unable to control that. And like I said, they went into that whole herd mentality. There was no empathy shown toward him. No one on that scene said, hey, stop, back up. Get off of him, pull him off of him. That is disturbing that so many officers, not one, not two, 5 or 6 officers, no one said stop. No one tried at all. And then the pepper spray, like Pastor Drew said, that is, I don't know if anyone's been pepper sprayed. That is probably one of the worst things that could happen to you. I mean, one of the most miserable things that could happen to you. People say they would rather get tased than to get pepper spray. So you're doing it. Now a person can't breathe properly. You're tearing up, you're gagging, and no one showed empathy, not even the paramedics, to go down and say, let me help this person. That shows a whole system that is broken.
And if I could, I wanted to jump in as well. What Uncle Ken said is absolutely where I wanted to go with it as well. This is a, you know, we can sit here and we can pinpoint this officer good, that officer bad. At the end of the day, it is a system, right? It's a system. And what frustrates me as a black man is that over and over and over again, it seems as though cops, be it black cops or white cops or anything else in between, it seems that to a disproportionate rate that restraint is possible when the person does not look like me, right? We don't see a lot of these instances, and I don't know enough to say there's none, but it seems as though in these situations where they just couldn't restrain themselves, or they were upset, or the person ran, or whatever the case might be. I've seen footage of white men and white women yielding weapons who were dealt with restraint, mm-hmm. and here in disproportionate fashion, we could have nothing in our hands, absolutely nothing. We could be on our knees, we could be running, we could be sitting, and then restraint goes out of the window. And I think that is what Chief Scott said. Because at the end of the day, this is systemic. Too often when you look at a black man, we look at a black woman and you infringe upon their rights, it seems that you do so because in your mind, you can get away with this. Where if I do this to a white man, if I do this to a white woman, I'm I'm putting my career at risk. But there seems to be a willingness to cross the line when they look like us, because at the end of the day, this system seems to be set up in such a way where you can get off when they look like us. Right, it happens too many times, and so I think to the points that have been made, it's more than just grooming and preparing our young people to join the force, because even if you get good cops who join the force and you join a corrupt system, it's only going to be so long before you're tainted as well. And so the thing for me is, this is a top down thing. How can we get to a point? I don't have the answers for it, but how can we get to a point from the top down where we can change the system? Because unless the system changes, then it doesn't matter who joined the force as a good cop or a bad cop. The system is the system, and that has to change somehow.
Let's talk a little bit about the motive. I mean, we heard you talked a little bit before, Pastor Drew, about the motive and the allegations that are out there. How realistic, when you consider the motives and the allegations of the girlfriend or what have you, Chief Scott and Terrence Jones, is it for police officers to separate their personal life from their professional life? Because obviously, if you have a badge, you have a sense of control that the normal citizen doesn't have. And what things are in place to hold officers accountable that they're not using their badge for personal privilege or personal vendettas?
Yeah, I don't know the validity of that story.
Yeah.
I was trying to do some research. I even had a couple of friends of mine that I reached out to, and I said, hey, I'm working today. Can you please, if you hear anything about this and the validity of this? So I don't know the validity of that, Woody. So I really don't want to address that. However, I will address that, we cannot use our positions. It's called using your position officiously, where you know that you have a certain amount of power and you use it to your benefit. That's just part of professionalism. A lot of times, I don't think that using your position in this fashion goes to this extreme. If that were the case, and there was some sort of personal relationship, and these guys band together and say, we're going to punish this individual for having a relationship. If that happened, that is something that I would hope that is so off the grid that it never happens again. And I hope that the punishment for these officers fits the crime. I hope that they don't get a soft jury. I hope they don't get a soft judge, because if that is the case, they definitely stepped out of bounds. Police step out of bounds every day, and we know that. However, this incident is something that, just like I said, my almost 34 years of doing this, if that were the case, it would just be extremely appalling to me.
Well, what I would say is a lot of this happens because I'm going to go back to supervisors and internal affairs and police chiefs not holding officers accountable. You have officers that are making arrests and getting off the street, and they're making exceptions to them. They're saying, "Good job, good boy, you did a good job." When they get these excessive complaints, they don't do fair, impartial, objective investigations. One of the things that needs to be changed is that as soon as you get an excessive complaint against you, whether you're in plain clothes or in uniform, you should be taken off the street.
Yeah.
You should be put on administrative leave, paid administrative leave, because in America you're innocent until guilty, but you should be taken off the street. And I've had cases where they took officers off the street, but they didn't let them do overtime detail. In other words, they took them off the street, administrative leave, and then said, okay, here's a traffic detail. They still reported with getting money. I'm saying they should be taken off the street, make their base salaries, because most of these officers are making a lot of money in overtime. I know I did when I worked undercover in all these different special units. We had a ton of money in overtime. So you get accused of excessive force. You should be taken off. And I would say the minimum minimum 30 days. But depending on what you're accused of, then it may go 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. It just depends. Whether you're accused of slapping someone, punching someone, shooting someone, killing someone, depending, should be degrees. If you do this, then there should be a repercussion. And if you're cleared. And then a lot of the cases I get involved in, I interview the same people that internal affairs, and I interview the same people that the police department interviewed and that the prosecutors interviewed. And when I interview them and I show them the statements, they say, "Oh, I didn't." Well, can I record you? Sure, you can record me. And they stand behind it. I didn't say that. Well, what did you say? I said this, that, and the other. And then I filed a complaint against the internal affairs consultant, against the internal affairs sergeant, lieutenant, the commander of internal affairs. Mm-hmm. And in every case, I'm talking about a lot of complaints. In every case, there's no investigation. They're not held accountable. It's a good old boys club. It's a good old boys club. Unfortunately, most police departments across the country, in all the cases I got involved in Tennessee and Florida, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware, and all these other places, the powers that be are white that, in my opinion, could care less about poor white people, and they could care less about minorities. And in all those cases, they're not holding. Very rarely they're locking anyone up. Very, very rarely. I was able to get 13 officers locked up.
Right.
But I've investigated hundreds of cases across the country and only got locked up. So
Terrence is right, because when the officer killed my brother, he was supposed to be put on leave, and he was reassigned as a detective and received an increase a couple days later. His salary was increased for killing my brother. And I truly believe the only way, and I definitely agree with you, it's not about bringing in, bringing in new men or women into the system and training them. It's about changing the system. We don't know how powerful we are. That's the problem. We are so powerful, we don't even know it. If we come together in bodies, no matter what color, religion, race, we have to continue to fight for equal rights. We have to continue to educate our community on why it's so important to vote, because all of these activists and all of these people that are getting funded by our city politicians, they're getting funded, but they're not doing the work. So they're not doing the work. That's why the city and these officers are getting away with it, because they're getting away with their actions. If we continue to come together and fight together in solidarity, we definitely can make change. And numbers is what makes change. I did it. We did it. And Mr. Jones is, and as he mentioned, he's definitely involved in my brother's case. If it wasn't for him, I don't think we would have went this far. So I just pray that, this platform would allow people to learn how important it is that we, get more involved in our city, attend the council meetings, because there is money in our community where we can actually make the change.
I love what you're saying, and we're gonna pivot as we wind down now. I really take to heart what you have each said regarding making the change and pressing forward. This all brings back to mind. Wait, it has to be other people's favorite scene from the movie, but that part in Malcolm X where they all show up and they're outside, and he goes in there and he finds that name, and everybody's there. I'm hearing from you that, number one, we can demand that perpetrators are relieved of duty, and if at the very least, but also take them out of circulation. So they shouldn't be somewhere as moonlight security somewhere else, where the same opportunity and their access to other people still exists. So I hear that as very loud and clear. I hear you saying we'll show up at every city council meeting and any other meeting regarding this until change is made. And we keep doing it. So today, each one of us, me included, attend when nothing is happening and when something is happening, and continue to press and bring people. As we pivot, here's two things, and these are my two things, but I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but there's so many comments in the chat. Where people are truly looking at this, and I'm looking at Pastor Drew and Chaplain Garrison. People are really looking at this as, one, in some ways, a prophetic instance where we're seeing conscienceless, unconscionable acts, people with no remorse. And this represents a new level of low. So from a spiritual standpoint, what are you making of this? And then I want to come from there, especially Crystal Foster and Pastor Drew and Makiba Garrison. You need to help us with this trauma.
So let me start with those that are watching from the Memphis area. I want to tell you a great organization to become a part of, and that is the Micah Interfaith Coalition for Action. We divide up into teams and we tackle different issues within the city, from hiking of rent prices to the homelessness to utility bills being too high. So Micah is a wonderful organization if you are local to become a part of. And we have affected change over numerous agendas for our city. So that's first and foremost. And I agree with the comments. I think that this is a spiritual battle. I don't know if, just saying that prophecy is being fulfilled is enough, because sometimes I feel like the church takes that as a cop out. Yeah, this is what we should expect in end times. I do believe we must be action. We must be in movement. We must be striving for humanity to feel as if they are loved, no matter their sexual identity, no matter their race, no matter their creed. All of these things are worth fighting for. And so I suggest not only reading the Bible from a lens of the European slave master, but reading it from the liberating Jesus that I have come to know personally. And so liberating Jesus stood with the least of these, stood with the disenfranchised, and said, you know what? Let me let you know that the power that be is incorrect. The power that be is out of order. And so I'm going to cause some order. So he disrupted systems. And so this is not new. There is nothing new under the sun. We just happen to see it in live, from these webcams. And so let's think about the action that we could take in our local communities, whether that's joining organizations such as Micah, your city council, making sure that you vote, and also being fervent in your prayers, fasting and praying for change means that we're not idly sitting by, but we are demanding change, and we're asking God to step into the situation.
I want to piggyback on everything that Makiba said. I agree with it wholeheartedly, and I'll take the angle of mental health, and not only from the standpoint of our own mental health. We talked about that a little bit. We see things like this so much that we become desensitized to it. We have emotional reactions to it when we don't even realize it. And so not only protecting our mental health, but if we're going to be fair about this all the way around, right? We've talked about how the system needs to change, but if I'm being honest, I don't just think that the system has failed us citizens, but I think that the system has also failed the police officers, right? When you think about the job of a police officer, the high stakes, the things you have to be aware of. Your head is on a swivel. You're put in situations that the average person cannot even fathom. And a lot of these officers are put in those kind of situations with no sleep, working 24 hours around the clock, overtime upon overtime. And anybody who has ever either skipped sleep or for whatever reason couldn't fall asleep, like you're not in your right mind. You're not thinking clearly. You're not as keen to certain things as you would be.
Mhm.
And so I think a part of the systemic change is changing how they administer their officers, how they treat their officers.
Mhm.
I don't think it should be optional in certain cases where the officer should be able to choose when they want to work overtime. I think you need to be told sometimes when you need to sit down. Or I think the rotation of officers needs to happen more often than not, because they're putting their officers in compromising positions. And then when they're in that compromising position and they're not thinking as clearly and they make a decision that's a life-changing decision, right? So I think it's not just the mental health of citizens. That's important as well. But we've also got to look at this on both sides as well. And from the standpoint of our officers, I think our system needs to better set them up to be successful so that we find ourselves in less of these situations as well.
Mhm.
I appreciate that comment, Pastor Drew. Thank you.
Yes, I totally agree. And I also think that, I just think that, we also have to get involved. As you mentioned, mental illness. People don't realize how that is affecting so many people. That's a disease in itself, especially with what we're going through day to day, with housing, as you mentioned, limitations of food. So, we have to be mindful, although, yes, it's justice for Tyre Nichols, justice for everyone that's going through this, justice for my brother, Edward Foster. But just don't say justice to someone in another state. Justice for the ones that are in your community. Fight for the people that's in your community, because I've learned the word consistent. As you mentioned, you have to be consistent. The minute you take a break, everything is gonna fall. When you come and you standing and you're consistent with what you're doing for the change, it will work. I'm telling you, I am a living soul of it. I've seen it happen, and I'm walking in those shoes. And I mentioned that I tell my kids, never accept no for an answer in life. You
Mhm.
fight all the way to the end. Even if you go into the store and the supervisor tells you no, you ask for his manager. Like, that's just how we have to be mindful. And we also have to keep in mind, we have to, be more involved with our children and their whereabouts. And so, like they mentioned, fight for body cameras. As I took my pain into a purpose. Got, we stand for justice, because you can't make change by yourself. You have to do it together. And in order for us to make change, as he mentioned, the system, and there are good offices. Yes, there are good offices, but be an example. Don't let the union, the union is very strong and they back up these offices. The union should be standing, protesting with us, with the citizens, to show that this blue code don't work. Once you violate your rights, you're letting the citizens know that you're with us. So
Mhm.
until that happens, we're going to continue to, have these issues.
Yeah.
So again, it's definitely the system. And I just pray that, while everyone is tuned in, and I'm thankful that everyone is tuned in, just, just get more involved in your community. That's the only way we can make change. Change starts within us.
I think I wanted to say, as we go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What? The question was asked as we wrap up now, whether or not there was a motive. You asked the motive, what the motive was, and the one thing that we know, there's no justification. There would be no motive, and in my sense, that we're searching for a mystery that cannot be answered. In that sense, it is spiritual. There is no reason for it. There is no way that you can look at it. There's no dimension, no facet of this that could call for this kind of inhumanity. And so we're fighting a major battle. And so I appreciate what you have said, Chaplain Garrison, regarding fasting and prayer while we move and get engaged.
Well, as we wrap this show up, we have had a dynamite panel. I mean, a dynamite panel. And I just want to thank you, Terrence Jones, for sharing your expertise. Um, I was trying to find your web page, Crystal Foster. Is it a web page? Can you share that in the chat? If you
Yeah.
go to the comment section, can you put it in there?
Everything under my social media, I'll put in my chat, is under my name, Crystal Foster.
Okay, and social media. If you could
Yes.
just put that in the chat, we want people to see it. Terrence Jones has an outstanding organization, and going back to him, because I just wanted to share that here is a police officer who's retired that knows the system is broken and is fixing it, not trying to protect it. Let's make sure we clearly understand. He knows about Scorpion. He knows about these different tactics, and he's developed a nonprofit organization to fix it and to help others. And that leads me to Crystal Foster, because Crystal Foster shared, I did this by myself until Terrence Jones and Eric Pettis helped me because I didn't have anybody. So for someone that wonders about the power of one, I invite you to look at Crystal Foster. She could tell she's a living example of the power of one and what one person can do to change the system. As I look at our preachers here, Nathaniel Drew and Makiba Garrison, just like we want police with characters, we want ministers of the gospel with characters. And so let's not just limit this thing to blue, but the same thing that happens in blue also happens in the church. And the church needs to stop being unequally yoked with the world and moving problems from one area to another and calling sin by its right name and passing the buck and not doing the issues. It's easy to call out the police, but if you're not calling out your own colleagues in ministry, your voice doesn't have, the trumpet doesn't have a certain sound. And so I just want to commend you what you're doing for mental health, how you're working with families and pastors to checking to ensure that they're okay. But the responsibility works both ways. You know, it's easy to call others out and talk about what others aren't doing, but the church needs to do the same thing. And unfortunately, in our church, we have consistently shown to be unequally yoked with the world when it comes to systemic racism. In fact, our dead pioneers have a bigger club dead from the grave than some of our live leaders today when it comes to these issues. And it's a crying shame that after all these years, we can't get better. And so I want to thank you both for coming on the show, sharing your expertise. The Micah Project is brilliant. Working with other churches, we don't have all the answers. We need to partner with the Terrence Jones, the Crystal Fosters, and the Micahs, and stop thinking we need to lead, but also actually follow and be supportive, because there's some insights and there's some things that we can learn to make the communities surrounding our churches stronger and better so that they can actually hear the gospel. And so many times we're trying to put people in the gospel and they can't even come out their homes because it's not safe. So many times we're trying to put people in the gospel and they're homeless and they don't have food. And so I really want to thank Pastor Drew, Pastor Garrison, Dr. Garrison for their practicality in ministry, so that people can see a witness and not just hear a witness. And then last but not least, Chief Ken Scott, there's a saying that every good thing comes from Lake Region Conference. I know y'all don't want to hear it.
Watch yourself. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But we the granddaddy of them all. There's a certain swag. But Kiva knows about it because she's one of us as well. But I want to thank you for coming and sharing your expertise in different municipalities with policing and how you are using that expertise, because I know you were in Charlotte, North Carolina, you were in Dallas, doing these trainings so that churches stay safe, and you make yourself available like everyone else here. And we appreciate that, because there's also another side. We know all police officers aren't bad. We know all pastors aren't bad. But we know if we don't have the right system and that holds people accountable, we have what happened today. We have what happened to Crystal Foster, and we have a cycle that continues to repeat itself over and over again. And today we're saying we had enough. We need to find some organizations in our community and be a part of it. We need to get on these police boards. We need to get on these commissions. We need to hold the prosecuting attorney's office accountable. We need to vote people out of office. And regardless of the allegations that led to the motives, if people are doing wrong, get them out.
May I
Get
just
them
say,
out.
yes, not just any organization, active organizations that are showing, that are doing the work. Because you have organizations that are just active and they're just receiving the funding. But do your work, and we'll get it done. And I appreciate you inviting us. Thank you. And yes, definitely follow Terrence Jones because he's definitely on my brother's case, and we will get justice.
And then last but not least, I want to thank Carmela Monk. If you do not have a subscription to Message Magazine, please go to messagemagazine.com. You can get a digital description. You can get one mailed to your house. And she is on top of things as they are happening. And she wants to make sure that Message is not only a message about Christ, but a message about what's taking place in our communities and how we can overcome through Christ. So if you do not have it, please go to messagemagazine.com and sign up for your subscription today. Once again, this has been the Conscience and Justice Council and Message Magazine joint presentation on the excruciating cries from Memphis. We invite you to tune back in on this coming Friday. I repeat, this coming Friday, we are going to be back with our Black History Special, and we'll be on each and every Friday. We will be on each and every Friday in February. Our first Friday will be none other than Dr. Keith Augustus Burton. He will be preaching for us this coming Friday night. The second Friday, we're going to talk about Black wealth. The third Friday, we have Dr. Marvin McNichol from the Cleveland Baptist Association. He'll be our speaker. You want to be a part of that. And then the last Friday, we'll have the authors from the book House on Fire, that will feature Zach Plantek, Janice DeWhite, Maury Jackson, and Andy Lampkin. So you're going to want to tune in, same channel, each Friday night in February at 8:00 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Once again, the Conscience and Justice Council will have its Black History celebration each and every Friday night in February. Once again, folks, they loving you. They're telling they thank you. They're saying keep going. They're enjoying your messages, and the comments from people are just overwhelming. So it looks like we might have to do a show again and talking about, success stories about turning pain into purpose. Success stories about turning pain into purpose. And it seems like they want to hear from each and every one of you. So we will bring you back later this year so we can hear success stories in turning pain into purpose and how working with the organizations and the suggestions that you have made continue to make a difference. I am trying my best, but I want to make sure I get every single comment. And y'all are such fan favorites.
Yes, and definitely we need to have a discussion on black crime, because it's not just policing, it's us killing each other. So, that's one of the biggest things that's going on around the world. And so, we have to, we can't say Black Lives Matter if we don't respect Black lives. We're killing each other. So that's another topic. And again, thank you so much for inviting us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. God bless you. And we'll look forward to seeing you Friday night at 8:00 p.m.
All right, everyone, take care.